Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. And today we are going to be specifically talking about corruption. And what about corruption? We are going to be talking about corruption as a driver for migration. Now, as with many of my videos, this is drawing on some of my own research, but especially on the research of other scholars. I am going to be drawing here a lot on research from the MIGNEX project, which I've also talked about plenty on this channel before, and of course what other colleagues have done, so feel free to check out all of that research. Of course, I'll be putting the links to these studies and papers down in the description below, as I normally do. Now, as I've spoken about on this channel many times before, there are many different reasons why people migrate. There are maybe more positive reasons, there may be more negative reasons, there may be more neutral reasons why people have different motivations for migration and different aspirations for migration. And among these many drivers of migration, we also have corruption, but also the perception of poor governance that are also really important in these drivers because they can contribute to a feeling of hopelessness in a specific area or an idea that the future does not look very bright in a specific country or community context, and this can also make them want to migrate or at least stimulate desires to migrate. Now, if we look specifically at corruption here, this is because corruption is typically a symptom of deeper and often less visible institutional problems or challenges. Corruption in hospitals and schools and the police force, for example, can be a sign of low pay in those institutions, or poor management, or a lack of accountability more generally. So here we can really see that corruption can have diverse and really far-reaching consequences. It can have both direct and indirect effects on migration and migration aspirations. So from a direct side, it could be directly a drain on people's finances because, for example, they have to pay bribes and extra fees for services that should be free. But corruption can also be an impediment to decent employment. For example, when a qualified person is not able to get a job because they don't know the right people or have the right friends, so there is really a lack of meritocracy in the system. And we see this in a number of different instances. So for example, in the MIGNEX project, if we just take one of the research areas that we did research in, which is Redaf. This is a declining mining town in the Tunisian desert. Here we see that high levels of corruption really block many qualified young people from the most desirable jobs. And this really contributes to an overwhelming sense of hopelessness in the area. And that in turn then increases people's desire to migrate. So for example, in the research in the MIGNEX project, among the 26 MIGNEX research areas, people living in communities where being asked to pay for a bribe for a service is common practice are 36% more likely to have strong wishes to migrate. And again, I'll make sure that you see the research where this is specifically coming from. Now, corruption can also have indirect effects on migration. For example, when public funds are diverted from their intended use or personal interests steer decision-making in institutions, this harms development, which can then be a driver of migration aspirations. This could affect the quality and access to services like healthcare and education, but also the rule of law in a specific area. And these deficiencies, which are at least in part caused by corruption, are then actually seen as the driver of these migration aspirations and migration more generally. So corruption is an important driver because it is not merely a nuisance, it's an obstacle to development, and it also often reflects a deeper sense of societal dysfunction and can lead to a sense of hopelessness in an area. So here, we're really seeing that corruption can play both a direct and indirect role in people's migration aspirations. As MIGNEX research points out, investing in more good governance initiatives and strengthening civil society is really an opportunity for development cooperation to improve local conditions and strengthen people's confidence to build their futures locally. So actually, it's still only a small fraction of the EU Trust Fund development funds were dedicated to the investment in governance and public services and institutions, with actually the majority of these development funds flowing into border and migration management projects. In fact, some research has even shown that aid has exacerbated poor governance and corruption in certain contexts, and I'll make sure to share that research here. So for example, cooperation with non-EU countries on migration and border management might have counterproductive effects if it supports authoritarian regimes or does not address human rights abuses. So for more on this, you can actually check out the video on my channel on the externalization of migration governance, when I go much more into these agreements and work together with non-EU countries on migration governance and border management. As stated by Weisner and Pope in their 2023 publication, development initiatives should remain focused on reducing hardships and enhancing the well-being of all, not just those seen as potential migrants. And it's important to recognize that migration is not only driven by hardships, but also by desires for learning, new experiences, and personal growth, and much more, and can have plenty of positive effects itself on development. Now, I hope this just gave you a quick understanding of how corruption can affect migration decision-making and at least migration aspirations. If you found this video useful, of course, feel free to pass it on. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to like and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any of the videos that we upload on a regular basis on different migration issues. And if you're interested in more videos on migration and corruption, you can check out this other video here on how migration can impede the development benefits of migration. And I definitely hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.